Welcome. You've arrived at this quiet moment, a pause in the rhythm of your day. As you settle in, let your body soften, let your thoughts slow, letting the busyness fade, little by little. Tonight we travel to a different kind of wilderness, not the frozen Arctic, but the Amazon rainforest, where the air is thick and warm, where the canopy towers overhead, and where storms arrive like walls of water. Out here, in the green world beneath the trees, indigenous communities have lived for thousands of years, building shelters that breathe with the forest, sleeping through deluges that would seem impossible to endure. Over the next while, we'll move gently through their story. We'll notice how palm thatch filters rain into rhythm, how hammocks cradle sleepers above the forest floor, and how generations have learned to rest peacefully while tropical storms pound the roof just overhead. So breathe deeply, let yourself relax, and let the quiet story of the rainforest unfold. The Amazon rainforest is not a silent place, least of all at night. The air fills with sound. Insects whir in a continuous chorus. Howler monkeys bark in the distance. Birds settle into the canopy with sharp calls that echo through the understory. This is the normal soundtrack, the baseline hum of a living ecosystem that never fully rests. But before a storm, something changes. The air becomes thick, heavy, saturated with humidity that clings to skin. The usual sounds begin to fade. The insects grow quieter. The monkeys cease their calls. The birds stop moving. This silence is not absence, but anticipation. The creatures of the forest, attuned to atmospheric pressure and subtle shifts in the environment, recognize what is approaching. They respond by falling still. This collective pause is the first signal. It is not sudden, but gradual. The constant background noise of the jungle diminishes, until only the low-level vibration of the forest floor remains. This is a sound more felt than heard, a tremor in the earth and air that persists even when all else has gone quiet. The smell of the air shifts. The usual scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation is sharpened by something metallic, electric. This is ozone, the smell of static electricity building in the towering clouds far above the canopy. It is the olfactory signal that accompanies the atmospheric signal, both announcing the same arrival. For the indigenous communities living within the forest, the Yanomami, the Tucano, the Ashaninka, and hundreds of others, these cues are familiar. They are not signals of danger, but of transition. This is the moment to check the thatch on the roof, to secure the hammocks, to draw close to the hearth. The storm is not an invasion. It is a recurring presence, a neighbour whose arrival is always announced. Humidity in the Amazon is a constant, but in the hours before a storm it intensifies. The air becomes tangible, almost liquid. It presses against the skin, makes breathing feel heavier, and turns every movement into an act performed underwater. This is not the dry heat of deserts or the crisp cold of mountains. This is moisture so dense it seems to weigh on the world. The metallic scent of ozone grows stronger. This smell comes from lightning forming high in the atmosphere, from electrical charges building in the clouds. It is sharp, almost astringent, cutting through the usual sweetness of the jungle. It is a scent that does not belong to the earth, but to the sky, a warning sent down through layers of air. The usual smells of the forest remain beneath this new layer. Damp earth, rotting leaves, the sweetness of flowers and fruit. But the ozone overlays them all, sharpening the atmosphere, adding an edge to the sensory experience that signals change. The forest responds to this atmospheric shift in subtle ways. Leaves turn slightly on their stems, exposing paler undersides. Certain flowers close. Small animals retreat into burrows or dense foliage. The forest is not preparing for disaster, but for a routine event, one that has happened countless times before and will happen countless times again. Indigenous knowledge reads these signs with practiced ease. The thickening air, the sharpening scent, the behavioural changes in animals, these are not mysteries but familiar patterns. They indicate the timeline of the storm's approach. How much time remains before the rain arrives, whether the storm will be brief or sustained, whether it will pass quickly or settle in for hours. This knowledge is not written down. It is learned through observation, passed from generation to generation through experience. Children grow up watching adults read the sky through the canopy, noting the changes in air and scent and sound that precede the deluge. By the time they are adults themselves, these signals are as clear as written text. The sky in the Amazon is rarely seen. The canopy towers overhead, sometimes reaching heights of 150 feet or more. Through this dense ceiling of green, the sky becomes an abstraction, a concept more than a visible reality. It is glimpsed only through small tears in the foliage, brief windows that show fragments of blue or grey, or the burning white of tropical sun. But the sky's mood is felt everywhere below. The light that filters down through the canopy changes colour and intensity based on conditions far overhead. On clear days, the light is green and golden, dappled and shifting. On overcast days, it becomes diffuse and grey, and in the hours before a storm, it takes on a quality unlike any other. The light becomes bruised purple. It is a deep, unsettling colour that casts the forest floor in an aquatic twilight. The green of the leaves appears darker, almost black in places. Shadows deepen. The whole world takes on the appearance of being underwater, as if the forest has been submerged beneath some vast, invisible ocean. This change in light affects everything. Colours shift. Contrasts increase. The forest, already dim beneath the dense canopy, becomes darker still. This is not the darkness of night, but something stranger, a twilight that arrives in the middle of the day, a false dusk that signals the storm's approach. The psychological effect of this light is significant. It creates a sense of enclosure, of the world contracting. The usual boundaries of vision, already limited by dense vegetation, seem to close in further. The space between trees feels smaller. The canopy feels lower. The forest becomes a more intimate place, a space that presses closer. But this is not threatening to those who live here. It is familiar. It is expected. The bruised light is part of the pattern, another signal in the chain of events that leads to the storm. It is a visual confirmation of what the air and scent have already announced. The indigenous communities of the Amazon have lived with these storms for generations beyond counting. The patterns of the weather are not mysteries but familiar cycles, as predictable as the seasons themselves. The signals that precede a storm, the thickening air, the electric scent, the changing light, the descending wind, are recognized without conscious thought, the way a person recognizes the face of a family member. This knowledge is not academic. It is practical, lived and embodied. It is learned by children who watch their parents and grandparents respond to the environment, who absorb the rhythms of the forest through daily experience. By the time a person reaches adulthood, the signals of an approaching storm trigger automatic responses, actions taken without deliberation. The responses are simple but essential. Check the roof thatch to ensure it is secure and properly layered. Inspect the hammock ropes to verify they are tied firmly to their supports. Bring any tools or materials inside that might be damaged by rain. Ensure the fire has dry wood available and that the hearth is positioned to stay dry even during the heaviest downpour. These are not panicked preparations. There is no sense of emergency, no fear of disaster. The storm is expected. The shelter has been built to withstand it. The preparations are routine, performed with the calm efficiency of any familiar task. The concept of the storm as an enemy does not exist here. The rain is not an adversary to be fought, but a natural force to be accommodated. It is part of the environment, as essential as the sun and the soil. The forest depends on this rain. It brings water to the trees, fills the streams and sustains the ecosystem that provides food and materials for the people who live within it. This philosophical stance shapes the physical response. Because the storm is not feared, the preparations are thorough but unhurried. Because the shelter is trusted, there is confidence rather than anxiety. The approaching storm is acknowledged, respected, and accepted as part of the rhythm of life in the forest. The location of a shelter in the Amazon is never chosen randomly. The forest floor appears flat to an untrained eye, but those who know the land can read its subtle topography. There are rises, barely perceptible elevations that lift certain areas above others. These are the places where shelters are built. The knowledge of where to build comes from generations of observation. When heavy rains fall, water moves across the land, seeking the lowest points. Flash floods can form suddenly, turning shallow depressions into rushing streams. Groundwater rises from below, saturating the soil and creating pools and muddy expanses. A shelter built on a rise avoids these problems. The elevation need not be dramatic. A difference of a few feet, sometimes only a few inches, is sufficient. The water flows around the higher ground rather than through it, leaving the shelter dry even during the most biblical downpours. Identifying these rises requires intimate knowledge of the landscape. A visitor might see only flat ground covered in vegetation, but someone who has lived in the forest can identify the subtle slope, the barely visible contour that indicates higher ground. This knowledge is geographical and experiential, built through years of watching water move during storms. The selection of the building site also considers other factors: proximity to water sources for daily needs, distance from areas prone to flooding, access to the materials needed for construction, hardwood poles, palm fronds, vines for lashing, protection from the prevailing wind direction, shade from the sun during the day. All of these considerations are balanced to find the optimal location. The rise that provides flood protection must also offer practical access to resources and protection from other environmental factors. The site selection process is complex, though it is performed with the ease of long practice. Once the site is chosen, the ground is prepared, the undergrowth is cleared, the surface is levelled where necessary, though the natural contour is preserved to maintain drainage. The earth is packed firm, creating a stable foundation for the structure that will be built above it. Among some groups, particularly the Tucano of the northwestern Amazon, the primary dwelling is the Maloca. This is not a small hut, but a colossal structure, a communal longhouse that can house multiple families under a single roof. The scale of the Maloca is impressive, with some structures exceeding 60 feet in length and 30 feet in width. The largest Malosas can accommodate 50 or more individuals, representing several extended families living together in a single shared space. The Maloca is rectangular, with walls formed by vertical poles planted into the ground and lashed together with vines. These poles are not randomly selected, but carefully chosen from specific hardwood species, known for their resistance to rot and insect damage. The wood must be strong enough to support the massive roof structure, while durable enough to withstand years of exposure to humidity and rain. The selection of these poles begins in the forest, where experienced builders identify trees of the appropriate species, size, and straightness. The trees are felled using stone axes, or in more recent times metal tools obtained through trade. The logs are then trimmed and shaped, with the bark often removed to prevent insect infestation. The process of gathering materials for a single Maloca can take weeks or even months. The vertical poles are planted into the ground at intervals of approximately 6 to 8 feet, creating a framework that defines the perimeter of the structure. The depth of the planting is critical. The poles must be set deep enough to remain stable under the weight of the roof and the force of wind, but not so deep that they reach waterlogged soil that could accelerate rot. Typically, the poles are set 2 to 3 feet into the ground, in holes that have been carefully dug and positioned. Once the vertical poles are in place, horizontal beams are lashed to them at several heights, creating a lattice structure that adds rigidity to the walls. These horizontal elements prevent the vertical poles from shifting or tilting under load. The lashing is done with tamishi vines, which are harvested from the forest and prepared by stripping away the outer bark to reveal the strong, fibrous core. The skill in lashing lies not just in tying knots, but in understanding how the vines will behave as they dry. Fresh tamishi is flexible and easy to work with, but as it dries, it shrinks and tightens, creating joints that become stronger over time. The builders must account for this shrinkage, leaving enough slack in the initial lashing to prevent the vines from breaking as they contract, while ensuring the joint will be tight once the drying is complete. The roof is the defining feature of the Maloca, a high peak structure that soars above the living space below. At the ridgeline, the roof can reach 20 feet or more above the ground, creating a vast interior volume that serves multiple purposes. This height is not merely aesthetic, but functional, essential to the building's performance during storms and daily life. The roof framework begins with the ridge pole, a single, long, straight timber that runs the length of the structure at its highest point. This pole must be both strong and light enough to be lifted into position, a challenge that often requires the coordinated effort of many people. Once the ridge pole is in place, it is supported by vertical posts that rise from the floor of the structure, creating an internal skeleton that bears much of the roof's weight. From the ridge pole, rafters descend to the tops of the perimeter walls, creating the steep pitch that is essential for water shedding. These rafters are spaced at regular intervals, typically 2 to 3 feet apart, and must be carefully shaped to ensure they meet the ridge pole and wall plates at the correct angles. The geometry of the roof is complex, requiring an intuitive understanding of angles and forces that has been developed through generations of building experience. Cross-bracing between the rafters adds structural rigidity, preventing the roof from racking or twisting under wind load. This bracing creates a lattice that distributes forces throughout the structure, ensuring that no single element bears excessive stress. The result is a remarkably strong framework despite being built entirely from materials harvested from the surrounding forest. The engineering sophistication of the Maloka framework is impressive. Modern structural analysis would recognise the principles at work: the distribution of loads, the use of triangulation for rigidity, the importance of proper jointing, but the builders accomplish all of this without written plans, mathematical calculations, or standardised materials. The knowledge is held in memory and hand, passed down through demonstration and practice. Once the framework is complete, the process of applying thatch begins. This is meticulous work that can take several weeks, requiring hundreds or even thousands of palm fronds. The thatch is applied from the bottom up, with each layer overlapping the one below it, creating a shingled effect that channels water downward and prevents penetration. The completed Maloka is a structure of remarkable strength and efficiency. It can house dozens of people, with each family claiming a section under the shared roof. The interior is divided not by walls, but by spatial arrangement and social understanding. Each family has its own area, defined by the placement of their hearths, hammocks, and possessions. The spatial organisation within the Maloka reflects the social organisation of the community. Families are not randomly distributed, but arranged according to kinship, status, and social relationships. The most important or senior families may occupy central positions, while younger or less established families take spaces near the edges. This spatial hierarchy reinforces social structures while maintaining the communal nature of the dwelling. Each family's section typically includes a hearth, multiple hammocks for sleeping, and storage areas for food, tools, and other possessions. The hearths are positioned carefully to ensure that smoke rises into the thatch without drifting into neighbouring family spaces. The hammocks are suspended from the roof beams or from posts, arranged to maximise space while providing privacy. The communal nature of the Maloka creates both benefits and challenges. The shared roof means shared maintenance responsibilities. When repairs are needed, the work is distributed among all the families, with each contributing labour according to their ability. This communal effort reinforces social bonds and ensures that the structure remains sound. The acoustic environment of the Maloka is unique. With multiple families living in a single large space, sound travels freely. Conversations, children playing, food preparation, tool making, all of these activities create a soundscape that is constant and varied. Yet there is also an understanding of acoustic privacy, an unspoken agreement to moderate volume during certain times, particularly at night when people are sleeping. The thermal environment of the Maloka is largely determined by the roof height and the presence of multiple hearths. The high peak allows hot air to rise and accumulate far above the living space, preventing the interior from becoming uncomfortably warm during the day. At night, the heat from the multiple family fires combines to warm the entire structure, creating a comfortable temperature even when rain cools the outside air. Light within the Maloka is limited during the day to what filters through gaps in the thatch and enters through the door openings. This creates a dim, cave-like environment that provides relief from the intense tropical sun. At night, the only light comes from the family hearths, creating pools of illumination surrounded by deep shadows. The Maloka is more than shelter. It is the physical manifestation of community, a structure that requires cooperation to build and maintain, that houses multiple families in shared space, that creates both individual family areas and common zones for gathering. The architecture reinforces the social fabric, making cooperation not just beneficial but necessary. The lifespan of a Maloka varies depending on maintenance and environmental conditions. A well-maintained structure can last 10 to 15 years or more, though the thatch typically requires replacement or repair every few years. When a Maloka begins to deteriorate beyond practical repair, the community may choose to build a new structure, often in a slightly different location to allow the old site to recover. The construction of a new Maloka is a major communal undertaking that can take months and involves the entire community. The work is often coordinated with periods of reduced subsistence activity, times when hunting and gathering demands are lower and labour can be devoted to construction. The completion of a new Maloka is often marked with ceremonies and celebrations that recognise the achievement and bless the new dwelling. The Yanomami people build a different form of shelter, known as the shabono or yano. This is a circular structure, sometimes as large as a football field, with a continuous sloping roof that rings an open central plaza. The design is radically different from the Maloka, reflecting different cultural practices, social organisation, and architectural philosophy. The shabono can be enormous. Some measure over 100 feet in diameter, creating a circular living space that can house an entire village of 100 or more people. The scale of these structures is remarkable, representing one of the largest traditional dwelling types in the Amazon. The construction begins with the establishment of the circular perimeter. This is done by marking out the circumference, often using a central stake and a measuring vine to ensure the circle is true. The diameter is determined by the size of the community that will inhabit the structure, with larger communities requiring proportionally larger circles. Along this perimeter, vertical posts are planted at regular intervals. These posts are typically 8 to 12 feet tall and are set firmly into the ground. The spacing between posts is relatively close, perhaps 4 to 6 feet, creating a dense framework that will support the sloping roof. The post must be carefully aligned to maintain the circular shape, as any irregularities will be magnified in the final structure. From each vertical post, a rafter extends inward at an angle, creating the sloping roof that is the shabono's most distinctive feature. These rafters do not meet at a central point, as they would in a conical structure. Instead, they extend only partway toward the centre, creating a roof that slopes from the outer perimeter down to an inner edge that defines the boundary of the open plaza. The angle of the rafters is critical. They must slope steeply enough to shed water effectively, but not so steeply that the interior space becomes cramped or the roof becomes structurally unstable. The typical angle is approximately 30 to 40 degrees from horizontal, creating a roof that extends 8 to 12 feet inward from the perimeter posts. The inner edge of the roof, where the rafters terminate, creates a circular opening at the centre of the structure. This opening can be 30 to 60 feet in diameter, depending on the overall size of the shabono. This is the plaza, the open heart of the dwelling, exposed to the sky and the elements. The philosophy behind this open centre is profound. Unlike the Maloka, which seeks to create a completely enclosed space, the shabono accepts the presence of the sky and the rain. The plaza is not a design flaw, but a deliberate choice, a space for communal gathering, ceremonies, and daily activities during dry weather. When rain comes, the plaza becomes a sacrificial space, accepting the water so that the living areas around the perimeter remain dry. The living space under the sloping roof is divided into sections, with each family occupying a wedge-shaped area that extends from the outer perimeter to the inner edge of the roof. These sections are not separated by walls, but are defined by the placement of posts, the arrangement of hammocks, and the position of hearths. Each family's section is their private domain within the communal structure. The outer wall of the shabono, along the perimeter, is often closed with palm fronds or bark, creating a barrier against wind and rain from the outside. However, this wall is not structural. It is simply screening attached to the vertical posts. The roof itself provides the primary protection from weather, with the perimeter wall serving mainly to block horizontal rain and provide some privacy. The inner edge of the roof facing the plaza remains open. This allows each family to look out into the central space, to see other families, to participate visually in the communal life of the village. The openness reinforces the sense of community, making it impossible to isolate completely from one's neighbours. The roof construction follows the same principles as the Maloka, with palm thatch applied in overlapping layers to create a waterproof surface. However, the circular geometry of the shabono creates different challenges. The thatch must be applied in a way that accommodates the curvature of the structure, with each frond positioned to follow the circular arc while maintaining the proper overlap for water shedding. The result is a roof that appears to flow continuously around the circle, with no obvious beginning or end. The visual effect is striking, a perfect ring of thatched roof surrounding an open plaza, a form that seems to grow organically from the forest floor. The central plaza serves multiple functions. During dry weather, it is the social centre of the village. Children play there, adults gather for conversations and ceremonies. Work that requires space, such as processing large game animals or preparing materials for construction, is done in the plaza where many people can participate. When rain comes, the plaza transforms. Water falls directly onto the ground, which quickly becomes saturated. Puddles form, then merge into a shallow lake that can cover the entire plaza. The ground becomes muddy, sometimes churned into thick mud by rain and foot traffic. But this is accepted, even expected. The plaza is designed to handle this water, to become temporarily uninhabitable, while the living spaces around the perimeter remain perfectly dry. The drainage of the plaza is managed through the natural topography. The Chabonneau is often built on a slight slope, or with subtle grading that encourages water to flow out of the plaza through designated low points in the perimeter. This prevents the plaza from becoming a permanent pond, allowing it to drain and dry once the rain stops. The eaves of the roof extend far enough over the living space to keep rain from blowing in horizontally. Even during storms, with strong winds, the deep overhang provides protection. The families living in their sections around the perimeter can watch the rain fall into the plaza, can observe the storm's intensity, but remain completely dry under the sloping thatch. The spatial arrangement within each family section is similar to that in a maloca. Hammocks are suspended from the roof beams or from posts. Hearths are positioned to provide heat and smoke without interference from neighbours. Storage areas are created using baskets, platforms, or simply designated spaces on the ground. Each family organises their section according to their needs and preferences. The social dynamics of the Chabonneau are shaped by its circular, open design. Privacy is limited. Each family can see and hear their neighbours. This visibility creates social accountability. Behaviour that might be hidden in separate houses is visible to the community. This can reduce conflict. The social pressure encourages cooperation and respect for communal norms. The circular design also has defensive advantages. With living spaces arranged around a perimeter and only a few entrances to the outside, the Chabonneau can be easier to defend against threats. In the past, when intergroup conflicts were more common, this defensive aspect was significant. The community could retreat into the Chabonneau and monitor approaches from the central plaza. The construction of a Chabonneau requires extensive cooperation. The circular design means that all the roof rafters must meet the perimeter posts at consistent angles, requiring careful measurement and coordination. The thatch must be applied uniformly around the entire circle. These tasks cannot be accomplished by a single family, but require the labour of the entire community. The building process often takes several months. From the initial clearing of the site to the completion of the thatch, the work is typically done during the dry season, when weather conditions are more favourable and subsistence demands are lower. The entire community participates, with labour divided according to skill, strength and availability. The completed Chabonneau represents a significant investment of labour and resources, but it provides shelter for the entire community for years. Maintenance is an ongoing responsibility, with families repairing their sections of thatch as needed and contributing to communal repairs of the structural framework. The Chabonneau creates a living environment that is fundamentally communal. Unlike the maloca, which houses multiple families but still maintains some separation through spatial arrangement, the Chabonneau makes the community constantly visible to itself. The open plaza ensures that no family is isolated, but community life is always present and observable. This openness shapes social behaviour. Disputes are less likely to escalate when they occur in view of the entire community. Celebrations are shared, as everyone can see and hear what is happening in the plaza. The successes and challenges of individual families are known to all, creating a web of mutual support and shared experience. During storms, the Chabonneau demonstrates its design philosophy clearly. The rain falls into the plaza, creating a spectacle that everyone can witness from their protected spaces. The storm is not excluded but is incorporated into the structure, visible and present but controlled. The families remain dry, warm and safe, watching the power of nature from a position of security. The roof is the most critical element of any Amazonian shelter. It is the barrier between the inhabitants and the deluge, the structure that must withstand the full force of tropical storms while remaining waterproof and breathable. The material used for this crucial component is palm thatch, and its preparation and application represent some of the most sophisticated traditional building technology in the world. The selection of palm species is the first critical decision. Not all palms are suitable for thatching. The fronds must be large enough to provide coverage. durable enough to withstand years of exposure to rain and sun, and structured in a way that allows effective layering. Different indigenous groups favour different species based on local availability and traditional knowledge. Atelier palms are commonly used across much of the Amazon. These palms produce large fronds that can reach 10 to 15 feet in length. The leaflets along each frond are tough and waxy, providing natural water resistance. The structure of the frond, with a strong central rachis and regularly spaced leaflets, makes it ideal for thatching applications. Geonoma palms are preferred in some regions. These palms produce smaller but very dense fronds that create excellent insulation in addition to water protection. The smaller size can make application more labour-intensive, as more individual fronds are needed to cover a given area, but the result is a thick, durable thatch. Other species, including various species of Mauritia, Euterpe and Enocarpus palms, are used depending on regional availability. Each species has slightly different properties, variations in frond size, leaflet density, durability and water resistance, and builders choose based on their specific needs and the characteristics they value most. The harvesting of palm fronds is done selectively and sustainably. Removing all the fronds from a palm would kill the tree, so harvesters take only a portion of the mature fronds, leaving enough for the palm to continue photosynthesizing and producing new growth. This ensures that the resource remains available for future harvesting. The timing of harvest affects the quality of the fronds. Mature fronds that are fully developed but not yet beginning to senesce provide the best material. Young fronds are too tender and will deteriorate quickly. Old fronds are beginning to break down and may not provide adequate protection. Experienced harvesters can identify the optimal fronds by their colour, texture and position on the palm. Once harvested, the fronds require preparation. Some builders use them whole, while others split them lengthwise to create thinner, more manageable pieces. Splitting is done carefully to preserve the strength of the central rachis while creating pieces that overlap more effectively. The splitting technique varies by tradition and by the specific palm species being used. The fronds are often allowed to dry partially before application. Fresh green fronds are heavy with moisture and can be difficult to work with. Allowing them to dry for a few days reduces their weight and makes them more pliable. However, they must not be allowed to dry completely, as this can make them brittle and prone to breaking during application. The application of thatch begins at the lowest edge of the roof, along the eaves. The first layer of fronds is positioned with the leaflets pointing downward, creating a surface that will channel water away from the structure. The butt end of the rachis is secured to the roof framework using vines, or, in some cases, by weaving it into the lattice of cross members. The second layer is applied slightly higher on the roof, overlapping the first layer by approximately half the length of the frond. This overlap is critical. It ensures that water flowing down the roof will encounter the upper surface of the lower layer, preventing it from finding gaps and penetrating to the interior. The pattern continues up the roof, with each layer overlapping the one below. The overlapping pattern creates a shingled effect similar to that found on traditional European roofs, but achieved with flexible organic materials rather than rigid tiles or shingles. The principle is the same. Water flows downward, moving from one overlapping layer to the next, always travelling on top of the material rather than underneath it. The density of the thatch varies depending on the builder's technique and the specific requirements of the structure. A denser thatch, with more layers and tighter overlapping, provides better water resistance and insulation but requires more materials and labour. A lighter thatch is quicker to apply but may not perform as well during heavy storms or may have a shorter lifespan. The edges of the roof, particularly the ridgeline and the corners, require special attention. These are areas where water can potentially penetrate if the thatch is not properly applied. The ridgeline is typically covered with specially prepared fronds that are bent over the peak and secured on both sides, creating a waterproof cap that prevents rain from entering at the highest point of the roof. The corners, where two roof surfaces meet, are similarly vulnerable. The thatch must be carefully woven and overlapped to ensure that water flowing down one surface does not find gaps where it meets the other surface. This requires skill and attention to detail, as the geometry of the intersection can be complex. The completed thatch roof is not a simple pile of leaves, but a carefully engineered system. The outer layers serve primarily to absorb and deflect the initial impact of raindrops. When rain strikes the roof, these outer fronds take the force of the impact, breaking up the water into smaller droplets and scattering them across the surface. The middle layers begin the process of channeling water. As water penetrates past the outer fronds, it encounters a denser matrix of material. The structure of the palm fronds, with their central rachis and regularly spaced leaflets, creates natural channels that guide water downward along the slope of the roof. The inner layers provide the final barrier against penetration. These fronds are the most densely packed, often compressed by the weight of the layers above them. They create a nearly impermeable surface that prevents water from reaching the interior of the shelter. Any water that makes it this far is channeled downward and outward, flowing along the fronds toward the eaves. The thatch is also breathable, allowing air and smoke to pass through while blocking rain. This breathability is achieved through the fibrous nature of the palm fronds and the slight gaps that exist between individual pieces. Water, being liquid, cannot pass through these small gaps when it is moving downward under gravity, but air and smoke, being gaseous, can pass through freely. This property is essential for the habitability of the shelter. Cooking fires produce smoke that must be allowed to escape. Without adequate ventilation, the smoke would accumulate in the living space, making it uncomfortable or even dangerous. The breathable thatch allows smoke to rise through the roof, dissipating into the outside air while rain is simultaneously being shed on the outer surface. The thermal properties of thatch are equally important. The layers of palm fronds create dead air spaces between them, similar to the way modern insulation works. These air spaces slow the transfer of heat, helping to keep the interior cooler during the hot day and warmer during the cool night and during storms. The thickness of the thatch affects its insulating properties. A thicker thatch creates more air spaces and provides better insulation, but it also requires more materials and adds more weight to the roof structure. Builders must balance these factors, creating a roof that provides adequate insulation without becoming so heavy that it stresses the supporting framework. The lifespan of a thatch roof depends on many factors. The palm species used, the density of the application, the amount of rainfall the area receives, and the intensity of the sun exposure. In the humid Amazon, where fungal growth and insect activity are constant threats to organic materials, a well-constructed thatch roof can last 3 to 7 years before requiring significant repair or replacement. Maintenance is an ongoing responsibility. Individual fronds may need replacement as they deteriorate. Areas that receive more intense sun exposure or more concentrated water flow during storms may wear out faster than other areas and require more frequent attention. The builders monitor the condition of the thatch continuously, addressing small problems before they become major failures. The process of thatching is labour-intensive and requires skill developed through years of practice. Young people learn by watching and assisting elders, gradually, developing the hand skills and the eye for detail necessary to apply thatch properly. The knowledge is not written, but embodied, held in the hands and mind of practitioners who have repeated the process hundreds of times. The thatch roof represents a perfect adaptation to the Amazonian environment. It uses materials that are locally abundant and renewable. It provides protection from intense rain while allowing the passage of air and smoke. It insulates against heat while remaining light enough to be supported by frameworks built from forest materials. It is, in every sense, a solution born from deep observation of and integration with the natural world. The angle of the roof is as important as the material that covers it. In the Amazon, where rainfall during storms can exceed several inches per hour, the pitch of the roof determines whether the structure will successfully shed water or collapse under accumulated weight. This is not a minor architectural detail, but a critical element of survival. A shallow roof, such as might be found in drier climates, would be catastrophic in the Amazon. Water striking a low-angle surface tends to pool rather than flow. With each passing minute of heavy rainfall, more water accumulates. The thatch becomes saturated, holding water like a sponge. The weight increases dramatically. The physics of accumulated water are straightforward but dramatic. Water weighs approximately 8 pounds per gallon. A square foot of shallow roof that accumulates just 1 inch of water is holding over 5 pounds of weight. During a heavy storm that drops 3 or 4 inches of rain per hour, that same square foot could briefly hold 20 pounds or more if the water is not immediately shed. Multiply this across the entire surface of a roof, and the forces become enormous. A shallow roof on a structure the size of a Maloka could accumulate several tons of water during a heavy storm. No framework built from forest materials could support such weight. The structure would sag, then buckle, then collapse, potentially injuring or killing those inside. A steep roof prevents this accumulation entirely. When water strikes a steeply pitched surface, gravity immediately pulls it downward along the slope. The water does not have time to pool or accumulate. It flows continuously from the point of impact down to the eaves, where it pours off into the surrounding area. The steeper the pitch, the more effective this water shedding becomes. At a 45-degree angle, which is common for Amazonian roofs, water flows almost as quickly as if it were falling through empty air. The thatch provides a guided path for the water's descent, channeling it downward and outward, but it does not slow the water significantly. The specific angle chosen for a roof involves balancing multiple factors. A very steep roof, approaching vertical, would shed water most effectively, but would require extremely tall supporting posts and would create less interior space. It would also catch wind more directly, potentially creating dangerous wind loads during storms. A moderately steep roof, typically between 40 and 55 degrees, provides excellent water shedding while remaining structurally practical. This range of angles allows water to flow freely off the roof while keeping the height of the structure manageable and distributing wind loads more effectively across the framework. The construction of a steeply pitched roof requires more sophisticated engineering than a shallow roof. The framework must support not only the weight of the thatch, but also the forces created by the roof's geometry. The steep angle creates components of force that act both downward and outward, trying to push the walls of the structure apart. This outward thrust is countered by the structure's framework. In the Maloka, the perimeter walls and the internal posts work together to resist the spreading force. The lashing between vertical and horizontal members must be secure enough to prevent the joints from separating under load. The foundation, where the posts enter the ground, must be stable enough to resist the tendency of the post to tilt outward. In the Shibono, the circular geometry helps distribute these forces evenly around the perimeter. The ring-like arrangement means that the outward thrust at any one point is balanced by the inward forces from the opposite side of the circle. This creates a structure that is inherently stable, with the geometry itself helping to resist the loads. The steep pitch also creates significant interior volume. The high peak of the roof lifts the interior space, creating room for air circulation and for smoke from cooking fires to rise and disperse. This vertical space is not wasted but serves important functions for the livability of the structure. Heat rises, and in the Amazon's warm climate, allowing hot air to accumulate far above the living space prevents the interior from becoming uncomfortably warm. During the day, when the sun beats down on the thatch, the air just below the roof can become very hot. But because this hot air is 10 or 15 feet above the floor, where people live and work, it does not affect comfort levels significantly. The smoke from hearth fires also rises, drawn upward by its own buoyancy. In a shelter with a low roof, this smoke would accumulate in the living space, creating an environment that would be difficult to breathe in. But with a high, steeply pitched roof, the smoke rises far above the hammocks and living areas, dispersing into the thatch and eventually finding its way out through the breathable roof material. The steep pitch affects the drainage around the structure as well. Water pouring from the eaves falls at a considerable distance from the walls. On a Maloka with a roof that peaks at 20 feet and eaves that are 12 feet above the ground, water can fall several feet away from the base of the wall, depending on the wind conditions and the exact geometry of the roof edge. This creates a protective zone around the structure. The falling water, arriving in continuous streams during heavy rain, creates a curtain that helps define the boundary between the dry interior and the wet exterior. It is a visual and audible barrier, a wall of water that surrounds the shelter during storms. This water curtain also serves a practical drainage function. The water falls onto ground that is already saturated from the rain, but because it falls at a distance from the structure's foundation, it does not create erosion or pooling directly at the base of the walls. Instead, it flows away from the structure, following the natural contours of the land. The construction sequence for a steep roof requires careful planning. The ridgepole must be lifted to its final height before the rafters can be attached. This is often one of the most challenging moments in construction, requiring coordination among many people to lift the heavy timber into place and secure it to the supporting posts. Once the ridge is established, the rafters are positioned one by one, each carefully cut to the correct length and angle. The lower end of each rafter rests on the top of the perimeter wall, while the upper end meets the ridgepole. The angle must be consistent across all rafters to ensure an even roof surface. The spacing between rafters is determined by the need to support the weight of the thatch while minimising the amount of structural timber required. Closer spacing provides more support but requires more materials. Wider spacing uses fewer materials but may create sagging between the rafters. The typical spacing of 2 to 3 feet represents a balance between these considerations. Cross-bracing between rafters provides lateral stability, preventing the roof from racking or twisting under wind load. This bracing is particularly important on large structures where the spans are long and the forces involved are substantial. The cross members tie the rafters together into a unified framework that acts as a single structural unit. The completed steep roof is a testament to the builder's understanding of physics, geometry, and structural engineering. Without formal education in these subjects, without written calculations or computer models, the builders create structures that successfully handle the extreme loads imposed by tropical storms. The knowledge is empirical, gained through observation, and refined through generations of experience. When the storm arrives and rain pounds the roof, the steep pitch proves its worth. Water flows continuously from peak to eaves, never accumulating, never threatening the structure's integrity. The weight on the roof remains relatively constant, just the weight of the thatch itself plus a thin moving film of water. The framework designed to support this load performs exactly as intended. The steep roof is more than architecture. It is a solution born from necessity, refined through experience, and perfected over centuries. It represents the successful adaptation of human building to one of the most challenging environments on Earth. In this place, water falls from the sky in quantities that can be measured in feet rather than inches. Where the difference between the right roof pitch and the wrong one is the difference between shelter and disaster, the first sound of the approaching storm is not thunder, it is wind. The low, rushing roar builds steadily, like a great river flowing through the sky. This sound is massive and impersonal. It comes from everywhere at once surrounding the forest, filling the space between the trees. The sound is the wind moving through millions of leaves. Each leaf is turned by the force of the air, creating an individual rustle that combines with countless others to produce a continuous roar. The effect is overwhelming, a wall of sound that announces the storm's proximity. As the wind intensifies, the pitch of the sound changes. The rustling becomes a hiss, then a roar that drowns out all other noise. The howler monkeys have long since fallen silent. The insects are quiet. Even the constant low vibration of the forest floor is masked by the sound of wind in the canopy. This sound does not arrive suddenly. It builds gradually, growing in volume and intensity over minutes. It gives those in the shelter time to complete their preparations, to secure the last items, to settle into their places before the rain arrives. The psychological effect of this sound is significant. It is powerful, reminding anyone who hears it of nature's scale and force. But it is not threatening to those who are prepared. Inside the shelter, with the thatch secure and the hammocks ready, the sound becomes background, a reminder of the protection the shelter provides. The sound continues even after the rain begins, though it becomes harder to distinguish, as the percussion of raindrops adds to the auditory environment. The two sounds merge, creating a complex soundscape that will persist for the duration of the storm. The rain arrives not as a sprinkle, but as a solid wall. In the Amazon, storms do not build gradually from light mist to heavy drops. They begin with full force, a deluge that seems to pour from the sky as if from an overturned bucket. The first impact is on the canopy, far above the forest floor. The sound is deafening, a hiss like a billion kettles boiling over. This is the sound of water striking leaves, millions of individual impacts merging into a single, overwhelming noise. The sound is so loud it drowns out even the wind, becoming the dominant feature of the auditory environment. For several minutes, the forest floor remains relatively dry. The canopy absorbs the initial assault, catching the rain in its leaves, channeling it down trunks and branches. The upper layers of the forest intercept the water, breaking its fall and dispersing its force. Then the water begins to find its way down. It gathers on the large waxy leaves and pours off in heavy streams. It funnels down the bark of ancient trees, creating rivers that flow vertically from the canopy to the ground. The sound transforms from the high-altitude hiss to a percussive drumming as water hits wood, leaves, and the packed earth of the forest floor. The complexity of the sound increases. There is no longer a single sound, but thousands, each with its own pitch and rhythm. Water hitting different surfaces creates different tones. Leaves produce a soft patter. Wood creates a deeper thud. The packed earth of the forest floor responds with a dull impact that can be felt as much as heard. The water arrives in quantities that are difficult to comprehend. Rainfall rates during Amazonian storms can exceed several inches per hour. This is not a gentle rain, but a flood falling from the sky, a volume of water that would quickly overwhelm any structure not designed specifically to handle it. But the shelters of the Amazon are designed for exactly this. The steep roofs shed the water as quickly as it arrives. The thick thatch absorbs the impact and channels the flow. The raised ground keeps the interior dry even as water flows around the structure. The engineering works precisely as intended, transforming a potential disaster into a manageable event. Inside the shelter, the sound of rain on the roof is the dominant feature of the environment. The violent percussion of the deluge striking the canopy is transformed by the thatch into something different. The thick, multi-layered palm fronds do not block the sound entirely, but they muffle and soften it. The sound becomes a steady, rhythmic drumming. It is deep and resonant, created by millions of small impacts merging into a single, constant tone. This is not the sharp crack of hail on a metal roof or the gentle patter of drizzle on shingles. This is something between the two, a medium-intensity sound that fills the space without overwhelming it. The drumming has a hypnotic quality. The rhythm is constant but not mechanical. There are subtle variations, slight changes in intensity as the storm intensifies or eases, but the overall pattern remains steady. This consistency creates a form of white noise, a sound that masks other, smaller noises. White noise is useful for sleep because it blocks out sharp, unpredictable sounds that might wake a sleeper. A door closing, a voice calling, a branch snapping, these sudden noises can interrupt rest. But when these sounds are masked by a constant background tone, they become imperceptible. The brain filters out the steady sound and focuses on changes, but when the only sound is unchanging, there is nothing to alert the nervous system. The rain on the thatch provides exactly this kind of masking. The constant drumming absorbs all other sounds, creating an acoustic environment that is ideal for rest. The sound is not silent, but it functions similarly, removing the auditory stimuli that might prevent or interrupt sleep. The sound also varies by location within the shelter. Directly beneath the highest point of the roof, the drumming is slightly softer, as the water has farther to fall before striking the thatch. Near the eaves, where the roof slopes more steeply, the sound is louder and more intense. Families learn these variations and position their hammocks accordingly, finding the acoustic environment that best suits their preferences. Thunder in the dense jungle is unlike thunder in open landscapes. On plains or over water, thunder can be a sharp crack, an explosion of sound that makes the air itself seem to shatter. But in the Amazon, surrounded by layers of vegetation and dense, humid air, thunder is transformed. It becomes a deep, resonant rumble. The sharp edges are softened, absorbed by the forest. What remains is a low-frequency vibration, a sound felt as much as heard. It resonates in the chest, vibrates through the ground, travels up the hardwood posts of the shelter and into the hammock ropes. This thunder is not frightening. It is too distant, too diffuse to trigger an alarm. It is simply a reminder of the storm's scale, a confirmation that the atmospheric forces producing this rain are vast and powerful. But that power feels remote, separated from the immediate environment by layers of forest and the protection of the shelter. Lightning, which produces the thunder, is similarly transformed by the jungle environment. There are no clear flashes, no brilliant illumination of the landscape. Instead, there are diffused pulses of light that flicker through the canopy. The dense foliage scatters and absorbs the light, turning the sharp flash into a softer glow that illuminates the forest from above. These flickers create brief moments when the endless green becomes visible in stark detail. The silhouettes of leaves, the complex architecture of branches, the layered structure of the canopy, all are revealed for an instant, then disappear back into shadow. The effect is almost theatrical, like a stage being briefly lit before returning to darkness. The combination of rumbling thunder and flickering light creates a sensory experience that is powerful but not alarming. It is nature making its presence known, demonstrating its force while remaining at a safe distance. Inside the shelter, protected by layers of thatch and surrounded by the steady drumming of rain, these displays of atmospheric power become part of the background, acknowledged but not feared. In the Amazon, the hammock is not a luxury or a convenience. It is essential, the one piece of furniture that makes survival possible in an environment where the ground itself presents constant hazards. The decision to sleep suspended rather than on the earth is not cultural preference but practical necessity, a solution to multiple problems that would otherwise make restful sleep impossible or dangerous. The forest floor of the Amazon is never truly dry. Even during periods without rain, the humidity is so high that the ground remains damp. Moisture from the air condenses on every surface. The soil, rich in organic matter and constantly watered by the forest canopy above, holds water like a sponge. To lie down on this ground is to make contact with dampness that will draw heat from the body throughout the night. The thermal conductivity of damp earth is high. Heat flows readily from warm objects to cool ones, and from the warm human body to the cool, moist ground. A person sleeping directly on the forest floor can lose body heat at a rate that, even in the warm tropics, becomes uncomfortable and potentially dangerous. The continuous heat drain prevents deep, restorative sleep and can lead to hypothermia even when air temperatures are moderate. Elevation solves this problem immediately. By suspending the sleeper several feet above the ground, the hammock eliminates contact with the damp earth. The body is surrounded by air, which is a far poorer conductor of heat than water-saturated soil. The rate of heat loss drops dramatically, allowing the body to maintain its temperature with minimal energy expenditure. But thermal comfort is only one benefit of elevation. The forest floor at night becomes a highway for creatures that would make sleeping on the ground hazardous. During daylight hours, the ground may appear relatively quiet, with only occasional insects visible and larger animals rare. But darkness transforms the understory into a busy thoroughfare. Army ants are among the most formidable of these nocturnal travellers. These ants do not build permanent nests but move in massive columns that can number in the hundreds of thousands, or even millions. They march through the forest in well-defined trails, consuming any small animal they encounter. Their prey includes insects, spiders, and even small vertebrates that cannot escape the overwhelming numbers. The columns move primarily at night, when cooler temperatures and higher humidity make travel less stressful for the ants. They follow chemical trails laid down by scout ants, with each ant in the column reinforcing the scent with its own pheromones. The result is a river of ants that flows through the forest, following paths that may shift from night to night. A person sleeping on the ground in the path of an army ant column would wake to find themselves under attack by thousands of biting ants. The ants do not distinguish between obstacles and prey. Anything in their path is investigated and, if it resists or moves, attacked. The bites are painful, and the sheer number of ants can make escape difficult, especially for someone waking from sleep, disoriented in darkness. In a hammock suspended above the forest floor, the sleeper is invisible to the ants' trail-following behaviour. The ants march beneath the hammock, their chemical trails leading them along the ground. The hammock is not part of their known world, and unless the suspension ropes happen to cross their path, they never encounter the sleeping person. Scorpions present a different kind of danger. These arachnids are nocturnal hunters, emerging from hiding places to seek prey. They are equipped with venomous stingers that they use both for hunting and for defence. While most scorpion stings are painful rather than deadly, some species possess venom that can cause severe reactions, particularly in children or individuals with allergies. Scorpions are small enough to be difficult to see in darkness and are often hidden beneath leaves, logs or debris. A person sleeping on the ground might roll onto a scorpion, provoking a defensive sting. The scorpion, seeking warmth or simply wandering in search of prey, might crawl into bedding or clothing left on the ground. In a hammock, the scorpion's typical hunting grounds are bypassed entirely. The creature hunts on the forest floor, investigating crevices and spaces where prey might hide. The suspended hammock is outside this zone of activity, unless a scorpion climbs the support ropes, which is possible but less likely than ground-level encounters. The sleeper remains safe. Spiders of various sizes inhabit the forest floor and lower vegetation. Most are harmless, feeding on insects and playing important roles in the ecosystem, but some possess venom that can cause significant pain, swelling, or in rare cases more serious medical conditions. The Brazilian wandering spider, for example, is among the most venomous spiders in the world and is found in parts of the Amazon. These spiders do not build webs but actively hunt at night, moving across the ground and through low vegetation in search of prey. They may enter shelters seeking the insects attracted to human habitation. A spider hunting on the ground poses no threat to someone sleeping in a hammock several feet overhead, but could be a serious danger to someone on the forest floor. Snakes, including venomous species, use the forest floor as their primary travel route. While snakes are generally not aggressive toward humans and will avoid confrontation when possible, accidental encounters can lead to defensive strikes. A person sleeping on the ground represents an obstacle that a snake might crawl over or investigate, particularly if the person is warm and emits the heat signature that snakes can detect. Some snakes are attracted to human habitations because these areas concentrate prey, the rodents and other small animals that feed on stored food or scraps. A snake entering a shelter to hunt rodents might encounter a sleeping person on the ground. The encounter would likely end with the snake fleeing, but there is always the possibility of a defensive bite if the snake feels trapped or threatened. The hammock once again provides separation. A snake following ground-level trails, hunting in the leaf litter, or entering a shelter in pursuit of prey operates in the horizontal plane of the forest floor. The hammock exists in a different vertical zone, one that snakes rarely enter unless they are arboreal species, which pose different risks and behaviours. Beyond the protection from specific creatures, the hammock provides a barrier against the general accumulation of small irritants, biting flies, mosquitoes when they are active, crawling insects, leeches in wet conditions. All of these are primarily ground-level nuisances. The elevation reduces contact with these irritants significantly, though it does not eliminate them entirely. The construction of a hammock requires substantial skill and significant time investment. The materials must be carefully selected and prepared. In traditional practice, palm fibres are most commonly used. These fibres come from the leaves or stems of specific palm species and must be processed to extract the strong thread-like strands suitable for weaving. The processing begins with harvesting the palm material. Young palm leaves or the fibrous stems are collected and allowed to dry partially. Once dried, they are beaten or scraped to separate the fibres from the surrounding tissue. The individual fibres are then cleaned, sorted by quality, and prepared for spinning. Spinning transforms the short fibres into continuous thread. The spinner twists the fibres together, adding new material as needed to create a thread of indefinite length. The spinning can be done by hand, rolling the fibres on the thigh, or using a simple spindle. The technique requires practice to produce thread of consistent thickness and strength. Once sufficient thread has been produced, and a single hammock may require hundreds of yards, the weaving can begin. There are various weaving techniques, each producing hammocks with different characteristics. Some hammocks are woven as nets, with an open mesh that allows air circulation. Others are woven as solid fabric, providing more support and protection from insects. The net-style hammock is created by knotting the threads at regular intervals to form a diamond or square mesh pattern. The size of the mesh openings affects both the comfort and the functionality of the hammock. Larger openings use less material and allow better air circulation but provide less support. Smaller openings create more support but require more thread and can reduce breathability. The fabric-style hammock is woven on a simple loom or created through finger weaving techniques. The threads are interlaced in a pattern that creates a continuous surface. This style provides more even weight, distribution, and can be more comfortable for extended sleeping periods, though it is more time-consuming to produce. The length and width of the hammock must be carefully calculated. The hammock should be long enough to support the full length of the user's body with some additional material at each end for the suspension system. Width affects how much the hammock will wrap around the user. Wider hammocks envelope the sleeper more completely, which can be comforting but may feel restrictive to some users. The suspension system at each end of the hammock is critical for both safety and comfort. The threads or ropes that extend from the body of the hammock must be gathered and secured in a way that distributes the load evenly. Uneven load distribution can create stress points that may fail, potentially dropping the sleeper. Some hammocks gather all the suspension threads into a single point, creating a bundle that is then tied to the support. Others use a spreader bar, a stick or piece of bamboo, that keeps the suspension threads separated and prevents the hammock from bunching up around the sleeper. Each approach has advantages and reflects different cultural traditions and preferences. The material used for suspension must be stronger than the material used for the body of the hammock, as it bears the entire weight in a more concentrated area. Twisted palm fibre rope, braided plant material, or, in more recent times, manufactured rope can be used. The length of the suspension cords determines the height at which the hammock will hang. The attachment to the supports, posts of the shelter structure, trees if outside, or purpose-built stands, requires knots or lashing techniques that are both secure and adjustable. The hammock must support the full weight of the user without slipping or coming loose, but it should also be possible to adjust the height or tension as needed. The height at which the hammock is suspended involves a careful balance. Too low, and the sleeper risks contact with the ground or its inhabitants if the hammock sags significantly under weight. Too high, and getting in and out becomes difficult, and a fall could cause injury. The optimal height positions the bottom of the unoccupied hammock about 3 to 4 feet off the ground, so that when occupied and sagging under weight, the lowest point remains at least 2 feet above the floor. The tension of the hammock affects comfort significantly. A hammock that is suspended with very tight tension will not sag much when occupied, forcing the sleeper's body into a relatively straight position. This can be uncomfortable for the spine and may cause pressure points. A hammock with looser tension will sag more, creating a curved surface that cradles the body. The ideal tension creates a hammock that sags into a gentle curve when occupied, allowing the spine to adopt a natural, slightly curved position. The sleeper lies diagonally across the hammock rather than along its length, which flattens the sleeping surface somewhat and prevents the feeling of being constricted. Learning to sleep in a hammock requires some adjustment for those not accustomed to it. The suspended surface moves in response to any shift in weight, which can initially feel unstable, but this movement, once familiar, becomes comforting. The gentle rocking motion, similar to being in a boat or a cradle, can actually facilitate the transition to sleep. Positioning in the hammock also requires learning. Lying along the length of the hammock creates a curved position that some find uncomfortable. Lying diagonally, with the head toward one corner and the feet toward the opposite corner, creates a flatter sleeping surface that many find more comfortable. This diagonal position also opens up the sides of the hammock, allowing better air circulation around the body. The hammock provides a unique sleeping experience that differs from a bed in several important ways. There is no mattress creating heat retention and pressure points. The body is suspended with air flowing around all surfaces. The slight sway of the hammock responds to breathing and small movements, creating a dynamic rather than static sleeping surface. During storms, the hammock suspension provides an additional benefit. The vibrations from thunder that travel through the ground and up the support posts are dampened by the hammock's ropes. The sleeper feels these vibrations less than someone sleeping on a platform or directly on the floor. This isolation from ground vibrations contributes to more restful sleep during storms. The hammock also serves functions beyond sleep. During the day, it can be a place to sit and rest while working on handcrafts or tool maintenance. Children play in hammocks, using them as swings or climbing structures. The hammock becomes a multi-purpose piece of equipment, essential for daily life in the forest. Different communities have developed variations in hammock design that reflect local materials, cultural preferences, and specific environmental challenges. Some groups weave hammocks with integrated mosquito netting, creating an enclosed space that protects the sleeper from flying insects. Others create hammocks with built-in storage pockets for small items that need to be kept close at hand. The lifespan of a hammock depends on the materials used, the quality of construction, and the intensity of use. A well-made hammock from strong palm fibres can last several years with proper care. The hammock must be kept dry when not in use to prevent mould and rot. The suspension points, which bear the most stress, must be inspected regularly for wear. When a hammock begins to fail, when threads break, knots loosen, or the fabric weakens, it must be repaired or replaced promptly. The consequences of hammock failure during sleep could include injury from falling, but also exposure to the ground-level hazards the hammock is meant to avoid. Maintenance is not optional, but essential. The hammock represents a perfect example of appropriate technology, a solution that is locally sourced, culturally embedded, technically effective and sustainable. It uses materials that are renewable and available. It requires skills that can be passed down through generations. It solves multiple problems simultaneously, and it does all of this while creating a sleeping experience that, Once adapted to, many users find superior to sleeping on flat surfaces. As the storm settles into its full intensity, the sound inside the shelter reaches a steady state. The initial violence of the rain's arrival fades into a constant, unchanging rhythm. The drumming on the thatch no longer varies significantly. It becomes a single, sustained tone that fills the acoustic environment. This is when the sound becomes most conducive to sleep. The initial drama of the storm's arrival, the building wind, the first impacts of rain, the rumbling thunder, has passed. What remains is consistency, a sound that does not change or surprise. The human brain is remarkably adaptable to constant stimuli. After a period of exposure to an unchanging sound, the nervous system begins to filter it out, treating it as background rather than information requiring attention. The constant drumming of rain becomes invisible to consciousness, noticed only when it changes or stops. This acoustic filtering allows other functions of the brain to take precedence. Without constant auditory stimulation demanding attention, the mind can relax. Thoughts can slow. The transition from wakefulness to sleep becomes easier. The rain sound also masks internal bodily sounds that might otherwise be noticeable in the quiet of night. The sound of breathing, the movement of digestion, the small pops and creaks of joints. All these are covered by the rain's drumming. The body becomes quieter to the conscious mind, reducing stimuli that might prevent sleep. The rhythm itself has a lulling quality. Studies of white noise and rhythmic sounds show that they can entrain brainwaves, encouraging the patterns associated with relaxation and sleep. While the people of the Amazon would not describe it in these terms, they understand intuitively that the rain's rhythm is conducive to rest. The sound creates a sense of enclosure. With the world outside reduced to a wall of drumming rain, the interior of the shelter feels more protected, more separate from the environment. This psychological boundary reinforces the physical protection of the thatch and posts, creating a complete sense of safety. The smoke from the carefully managed hearth fires rises slowly into the thatch of the roof. This is not a malfunction or an unfortunate byproduct of burning wood. It is intentional, a deliberate feature of the fire management system that serves multiple critical functions for the habitability of the shelter. The smoke begins at the fire itself, where incomplete combustion of wood produces particles of carbon and other compounds suspended in hot air. The heat of combustion makes the smoke less dense than the surrounding air, causing it to rise through the physical principle of convection. The smoke follows the path of least resistance upward, drifting toward the high peak of the roof. As the smoke rises, it spreads outward, forming a gradually expanding plume that eventually fills much of the upper volume of the shelter. The rate of this filling depends on many factors: the size and intensity of the fire, the number of fires burning in the shelter, the ventilation rate through the thatch, and the wind conditions outside that may affect air movement within the structure. The first and most immediate function of the smoke is to season the thatch. As smoke passes through the palm fronds that form the roof, it deposits a thin coating of particles on the surface of the leaves. This coating has several beneficial effects. It helps preserve the thatch by creating a barrier that inhibits fungal growth and bacterial decay. The organic materials that form the roof are constantly exposed to humidity and are inherently susceptible to decomposition. The smoke residue slows this process significantly. The smoke coating also repels certain insects that would otherwise nest in or consume the thatch. Various beetles, moths and other arthropods can damage roof materials by feeding on the plant fibres or excavating galleries for nesting. The presence of smoke residue makes the thatch less attractive or even toxic to these pests, extending the lifespan of the roof. Beyond preservation of the structure, the smoke serves an immediate and vital function for human health. It creates a barrier against flying insects, particularly mosquitoes. These insects are not merely annoying, but are vectors for serious diseases including malaria, yellow fever, dengue fever, and various encephalitis viruses. In the pre-modern Amazon, before any medical interventions were available, avoiding mosquito bites was essential for survival. Mosquitoes are remarkably sensitive to smoke. The presence of smoke in the air interferes with their ability to locate prey. Mosquitoes hunt for blood meals by detecting carbon dioxide exhaled by mammals, body heat, and certain chemical compounds present in sweat and skin oils. Smoke masks or overwhelms these signals, making it difficult for mosquitoes to locate potential victims. Additionally, smoke is physically irritating to mosquitoes. Their small size and delicate structure make them vulnerable to particulates in the air. Dense smoke causes respiratory distress and disorientation. Even relatively light smoke creates an environment that mosquitoes strongly prefer to avoid, choosing instead to hunt in clearer air where their sensory systems can function properly. The concentration of smoke maintained in traditional shelters represents a careful balance. Too much smoke would be intolerable for humans, causing coughing, eye irritation, and potential respiratory damage with long-term exposure. Too little smoke would fail to provide adequate protection from insects. The ideal concentration is barely visible, a light haze that carries the scent of burning wood but does not cause discomfort. Achieving this balance requires skill in fire management. The type of wood burned affects smoke production significantly. Hardwoods, when burning as coals rather than active flames, produce relatively little smoke while generating steady heat. The fire is managed to maintain this coal state rather than allowing large flames that produce excessive smoke and consume fuel rapidly. The moisture content of the wood also affects smoke production. Completely dry wood burns very cleanly, producing minimal smoke but also burning quickly. Slightly damp wood produces more smoke as the moisture evaporates, creating steam that carries smoke particles. Experienced fire tenders select wood with appropriate moisture content to achieve the desired balance of heat production and smoke generation. The positioning of wood in the fire affects how completely it burns, and thus how much smoke is produced. Wood placed directly in the hottest part of the fire, surrounded by coals, burns most completely and produces less smoke. Wood placed at the edges of the fire, where temperatures are lower, may smoulder and produce more smoke. Strategic positioning allows the fire tender to adjust smoke production as needed. The smoke carries a distinctive scent that varies with the wood species being burned. Some hardwoods produce aromatic smoke that many people find pleasant or at least neutral. This scent becomes associated with home, safety, and comfort. It is the olfactory signature of the protected space, distinctly different from the fresh, vegetative smell of the rain-washed forest outside. The smoke also serves a subtle social function. The presence of smoke rising from a shelter signals occupation and activity. In a landscape where structures can be difficult to see through dense vegetation, smoke is visible from a distance. It announces human presence and can serve as a navigational aid or a signal of welcome to visitors. The rising smoke eventually finds its way through the breathable thatch and disperses into the outside air. The movement of smoke through the roof creates a gentle air circulation pattern that helps regulate humidity within the shelter. Moist air from breathing, cooking, and damp ground is carried upward with the smoke and expelled, while drier air enters through the shelter's openings to replace it. This passive ventilation system works continuously without requiring any mechanical intervention. As long as the fire burns and produces warm air, the circulation continues. The system is self-regulating. Increased smoke production creates stronger convection currents that increase ventilation rates, preventing dangerous accumulation of smoke or carbon monoxide. The balance between smoke retention for insect protection and smoke expulsion for air quality represents sophisticated environmental management. The breathable nature of the palm thatch is critical. It allows enough smoke to escape to prevent dangerous accumulation while retaining enough to maintain the protective barrier. A perfectly sealed roof would trap smoke dangerously, while a roof with too many gaps would fail to maintain adequate smoke concentration. During storms, when the air outside is saturated with moisture and colder than usual, the density difference between the warm, smoke-laden air inside and the cool air outside increases. This enhanced density difference strengthens the convection currents, improving ventilation rates precisely when they are most needed, when the shelter is sealed against rain and the number of people inside is highest. The smoke also has antimicrobial properties. The compounds produced by burning wood include chemicals that inhibit the growth of bacteria and fungi. This is beneficial not only for preserving the thatch, but also for maintaining a healthier environment within the living space. In the humid Amazon, where fungal and bacterial growth are constant challenges, the antimicrobial effects of smoke help prevent the development of molds and pathogens that could affect human health. Traditional knowledge about smoke management is detailed and sophisticated. Different woods are known to produce smoke with different properties, some more effective against certain insects, others producing more pleasant scents, others burning more cleanly. The timing of smoke production is also understood. More smoke may be generated in the evening when mosquito activity increases, while daytime fires might be managed to produce less smoke when people are active, and visibility is more important. The smoke-filled air of the shelter becomes so familiar that its absence would feel wrong. For people raised in these environments, the scent and sight of smoke represent normalcy and safety. The smoke is not seen as pollution or a problem to be eliminated, but as an essential element of livable space in the forest. It is protection made visible, hanging in the air as a constant guardian against the biting insects that would otherwise make sleep impossible. One of the most important aspects of sleeping in these communal shelters during storms is the constant presence of others. The sounds, movements, and simple proximity of family and community members create a profound sense of security that isolation could never provide. This communal presence operates on multiple levels: practical, thermal, and deeply psychological, creating conditions that transform what could be a frightening experience into one of peace and rest. The most immediate form of this presence is auditory. In the quiet intervals between rain sounds, the breathing of other family members becomes audible. During deep sleep, this breathing is slow and regular, creating a rhythmic backdrop that itself can be soothing. The sound of human breathing is one of the first sounds a person hears in life, associated from infancy with safety and care. Even in adulthood, the presence of this sound communicates that one is not alone. Occasionally, someone shifts position in their hammock. The movement creates a soft creak as the palm fibre ropes adjust to the change in weight distribution. The sound is gentle, non-startling, but distinctly human. It is a reminder that others are present, that the space is inhabited, that the community remains intact through the storm. Sometimes a voice breaks the silence, a parent murmuring reassurance to a restless child, a brief exchange between adults confirming that all is well, a soft call checking on someone who may have expressed discomfort earlier in the evening. These voices are kept low, respectful of others trying to sleep, but their presence is meaningful. They demonstrate that people are awake, aware, and ready to respond if something requires attention. Children, particularly younger ones, may wake during the night. The storm sounds, while ultimately conducive to sleep, can be overwhelming to those not yet fully accustomed to them. A child waking to thunder and the drumming of intense rain might feel fear or confusion, but immediately upon waking, they become aware of the presence of parents and family surrounding them. The fear dissipates quickly, replaced by the security of community. A parent's response to a wakeful child is swift and gentle. A soft word, a hand reaching out to touch the child's hammock and rock it gently, a quiet reassurance that everything is as it should be. These minimal interventions are usually sufficient. The child, comforted by voice and touch, settles back into sleep knowing they are protected and surrounded by care. The communal sleeping arrangement provides redundant awareness. In a single family dwelling, all occupants might sleep deeply at the same time, leaving no one alert to potential problems. In a maloka or shabono housing multiple families, the probability that at least one person is awake or sleeping lightly at any given moment is much higher. This collective vigilance, distributed across many individuals, provides security without requiring anyone to sacrifice their own rest. If a problem develops, a section of thatch beginning to leak, a fire burning too low and threatening to go out, an unusual sound from outside that might warrant investigation, someone will likely notice before it becomes serious. That person can then address the issue or alert others who are better positioned to help. The redundancy of many people creates robustness in the face of unexpected challenges. The presence of others also has direct thermal benefits. Each human body is a heat source, continuously producing warmth through metabolic processes. In a single family shelter, this heat is limited to one small group. In a communal structure housing multiple families, the cumulative heat production from dozens of individuals contributes significantly to the ambient temperature. This effect is most noticeable during storms, when outside temperatures drop and the cooling effect of rain and wind penetrates the shelter. The combined body heat of the community, along with the warmth from multiple family fires, creates a thermal environment that is noticeably warmer than what a single family could achieve. The temperature difference might be only a few degrees, but in conditions where every degree matters for comfort, this contribution is meaningful. The arrangement of sleeping areas within the communal structure reflects an understanding of optimal heat distribution. In a maloka, families with young children or elderly members, those most vulnerable to cold, might position themselves in more central locations where the accumulated heat is greatest. In a Shabonyo, the circular arrangement means that every family benefits roughly equally from the collective warmth, with no position being significantly disadvantaged. The sharing of space also facilitates the sharing of resources. If one family's fire burns low, they can temporarily share the warmth from a neighbouring fire. If one family's stored food becomes damp, they might share a meal with neighbours while they dry their supplies. This flexibility and mutual support would be impossible in isolated dwellings, but the communal structure makes it natural and expected. The psychological dimensions of communal sleeping are perhaps the most profound. Humans are inherently social animals. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, people lived in groups and slept in proximity to one another. The isolated sleeping arrangements common in modern industrial societies are historical anomalies, not the norm. The communal sleeping arrangement of Amazonian peoples reflects a pattern that is deeply embedded in human biology and psychology. The presence of others activates ancient neural circuits related to safety and social bonding. These circuits evolved in environments where isolation meant vulnerability to predators, environmental dangers and other threats. Being part of a group meant protection, shared vigilance and mutual aid. The brain recognises the presence of others, and at a subconscious level adjusts stress responses accordingly. This effect is measurable in modern research. Studies show that people sleeping in proximity to trusted others have lower levels of stress hormones, more stable heart rates, and better sleep quality than those sleeping alone. The presence of others literally changes the body's physiological state, promoting rest and recovery. While Amazonian peoples would not describe it in these scientific terms, they understand intuitively that sleeping together is safer and more restful than sleeping alone. The communal presence also provides psychological reassurance during the storm itself. The thunder rumbles through the earth, felt as much as heard. The rain pounds the roof with impressive force. The wind makes the very structure of the shelter creak and sway slightly. To experience these things alone might trigger anxiety or fear, but experiencing them in the company of others, all of whom remain calm and continue sleeping peacefully, communicates that these experiences are normal and safe. Social learning happens even during sleep. Children observing adults sleeping peacefully through storms learn that this is the appropriate response. The calm behaviour of experienced community members provides a model that shapes the emotional reactions of younger or less experienced individuals. This cultural transmission of emotional regulation happens through simple proximity and observation. The bonds formed through shared experience of challenging conditions are strong and enduring. Families that weather storms together, that share warmth and space and vigilance through the long night, develop trust and mutual obligation that extends far beyond the immediate situation. These bonds are the foundation of community cohesion, creating social structures that are resilient and mutually supportive. The communal sleeping arrangement also creates accountability. In isolated dwellings, problematic behaviour might go unnoticed or unchallenged. In communal space, all behaviour is visible to the community. This visibility creates natural social pressure toward cooperation, respect, and consideration for others. A person who makes excessive noise, who fails to maintain their fire properly, who does not contribute to communal maintenance tasks, will quickly receive feedback from neighbours. This accountability is generally gentle and non-confrontational in well-functioning communities. It takes the form of soft suggestions, offers of help that subtly communicate expectations, or, in cases of more serious issues, formal discussions involving elders or other respected community members. The goal is not punishment, but the maintenance of harmonious communal life. The shared experience of the storm creates opportunities for storytelling and cultural transmission that happen in quiet moments. As people settle into their hammocks, as the rain drums steadily overhead, conversations might occur between adjacent families. Stories about past storms, about ancestors who weathered even more intense weather, about the proper ways to prepare and respond to various challenges. These narratives are shared naturally in the communal space. Children listening to these conversations absorb not only the factual content but also the emotional framing. They learn that storms are challenges to be met with preparation and calm confidence, not disasters to be feared. They learn the names of plants used for thatching, the techniques for fire management, the social expectations around resource sharing. The communal setting transforms everyday experiences into educational opportunities. The presence of multiple generations in the same space creates intergenerational bonding that strengthens family and community structures. Grandparents sleeping near grandchildren, sharing warmth and stories, passing down knowledge that has been refined over decades. Parents in the prime of life providing the physical labour and vigilance that keeps the community safe. Young adults learning from observation and participation how to eventually fill these roles themselves. The communal structure facilitates this generational continuity naturally. The sense of security provided by communal presence extends beyond the immediate storm. Knowing that one's community is reliable, that neighbours will respond to needs, that resources can be shared in times of scarcity. This knowledge reduces chronic stress and promotes overall well-being. The storm is simply one of many challenges that are faced collectively rather than individually, each successful weathering of difficulty reinforcing the bonds of mutual trust. In the deepest hours of the night, as the storm continues its steady drumming and the fires burn low, the communal space achieves a kind of collective stillness. Most people are sleeping deeply now. The breathing has synchronized somewhat, not consciously, but through the natural tendency of biological rhythms to entrain to each other. The space feels peaceful, protected, a shared sanctuary where dozens of individuals rest as one community. This is the culmination of centuries of cultural development, architectural knowledge, and social organization, a system that transforms nature's power into the conditions for human flourishing. The ability to sleep peacefully during a storm depends not only on physical shelter, but on psychological acceptance. The storm is not viewed as a disaster or emergency, but as a normal expected event. This fundamental difference in perception shapes the entire experience. When a storm is perceived as a threat, the body's stress response activates, heart rate increases, adrenaline flows. The nervous system remains alert, ready to respond to danger. Sleep becomes difficult or impossible because the body is preparing for action rather than rest. But when a storm is perceived as a natural, manageable event, the stress response does not activate. The body remains calm, the nervous system can relax. Sleep becomes possible because there is no perceived threat requiring vigilance. This acceptance is not naive or reckless. The people of the Amazon understand the power of storms. They know that storms can cause damage, that lightning can strike trees, that floods can form in low areas, but they also know that their shelters are built to withstand these forces, that their preparations are adequate, that the storm will pass. This knowledge comes from experience. Generations of people have weathered these storms in these shelters. The architectural knowledge has been tested and refined over centuries. The techniques work, the shelters stand, the community endures. The philosophical stance extends beyond mere acceptance to a kind of integration with the natural world. The rain is not separate from life, but part of it. The forest depends on this rain. The trees drink it in. The streams fill with it. The entire ecosystem is sustained by the water that falls from the sky. To resist or fear the rain would be to resist, or fear the very force that makes life possible. This integration creates a form of trust. Not trust that the storm is harmless, but trust that the relationship between people and environment is balanced. The forest provides the materials for shelter. The knowledge of how to use those materials has been passed down through generations. The shelter, built from the forest, protects against the forest. It is a circle, a system in balance. This trust allows rest. The shelter is strong, the fire is lit, the hammock is secure. There is nothing to do but wait for the storm to pass. And waiting in this context means sleeping. The body needs rest. The storm provides the perfect conditions, a steady sound, a safe space, a community presence. Sleep is not just possible but natural. As the storm continues through the darkest hours, the shelter settles into a deeper quietude. The initial activity of the evening, the meal preparation, the conversation, the tending of fires, has given way to rest. Most people are sleeping now. Their breathing slow and regular, their bodies relaxed in the cradling hammocks. The sound of the rain continues unchanged. Hours have passed since its arrival, but its intensity remains constant. This is a characteristic of Amazonian storms. They can persist for hours without weakening, pouring water from the sky in seemingly inexhaustible quantities. Inside the shelter, the fires have been banked to produce steady warmth without requiring constant attention. The flames are low, glowing rather than burning brightly. The smoke continues to rise, maintaining the protective haze that keeps insects at bay. The light from the fires is minimal, just enough to create a soft orange glow that defines the space without illuminating it fully. The temperature has stabilised. The initial chill that arrived with the rain has been countered by the fires and the body heat of the sleeping families. The interior of the shelter is warm but not hot, comfortable for sleep without being stifling. The air quality remains good despite the enclosed space. The breathable thatch allows continuous air exchange, drawing fresh air in through the entrance and allowing stale air to escape through the roof. This passive ventilation system works continuously, requiring no effort from the inhabitants. Outside, the forest is transformed by the rain. The ground is saturated with water flowing in temporary streams and collecting in depressions. The trees drip constantly as water continues to filter down from the canopy. The usual nighttime sounds of the forest, the insects, the frogs, the nocturnal birds, are silenced by the rain's drumming, but inside life continues peacefully. The sleepers are secure in their hammocks, wrapped in the knowledge that the shelter will hold, that the rain will eventually pass, that morning will come. The trust in their environment allows deep restorative sleep. This is the culmination of all the preparations, all the architectural knowledge, all the cultural understanding. The storm demonstrates nature's power, the shelter demonstrates human ingenuity, and the peaceful sleep of the families demonstrates the successful integration of the two. Often in the hours before dawn, the storm begins to fade. The change is gradual, so subtle that it might not wake a sleeping person. The drumming on the roof, which has been constant for hours, begins to soften. The individual impacts become slightly less forceful. The overall volume decreases. The transition from deluge to dripping can take an hour or more. The rain does not stop suddenly, but eases by degrees. The solid wall of water becomes a heavy rain. The heavy rain becomes moderate. The moderate rain becomes a drizzle. Finally, the drizzle resolves into individual drops falling from saturated leaves throughout the canopy. This dripping can persist for hours after the rain itself has stopped. Every leaf, every branch, every surface in the canopy holds water. Gravity pulls this water downward, one drop at a time. The result is a sound quite different from the rain itself, a gentle, irregular pattering as drops fall from various heights and strike various surfaces. The thunder, which has been rumbling periodically throughout the storm, becomes less frequent and more distant. The storm system is moving away, taking its electrical activity with it. The lightning flashes diminish until they disappear entirely, leaving the forest in natural darkness. The wind, which descended into the understory at the storm's approach, retreats back up into the canopy. The air at ground level becomes still again, though it remains saturated with moisture. The temperature begins to shift as well, no longer held down by the rain, but starting to rise slightly as the first hints of dawn approach. Inside the shelter, these changes are felt more than heard. The sleepers, accustomed to the constant drumming, may wake slightly as the sound changes, then settle back into sleep. The easing of the rain is reassuring, a sign that the storm has passed and that the forest is returning to its normal state. The fires, which have burned low during the night, may need attention now. Someone, perhaps an adult who has woken with the changing sound, might add wood to bring the flames back to life. This is done quietly, so as not to wake others, a gentle task performed in the soft orange glow of the embers. As dawn approaches, though the sky remains largely hidden by the canopy, the quality of light begins to change. The absolute darkness of night gives way to a grey pre-dawn luminescence. This light is diffuse and directionless, filtered through layers of wet vegetation, but it marks the transition from night to day. The air is different now. The oppressive humidity of the storm has lifted slightly, replaced by a coolness that feels clean and fresh. The smell is remarkable. Petrichor, the scent of rain on earth, combined with the sweet fragrance of wet wood and the sharp green smell of crushed vegetation. Inside the shelter, people begin to stir. The transition from sleep to wakefulness is gradual, unhurried. There is no alarm, no urgent need to rise. The storm has passed. The day is beginning. Life resumes at its own pace. The fires are tended, wood added to bring warmth and light back to full strength. The smoke rises again into the thatch, maintaining the protective barrier. The first sounds of human activity replace the breathing of sleep. The soft voices of conversation, the movement of people in their hammocks, the small sounds of morning routine. Outside, the forest is emerging from the storm. Water drips from every surface. The ground is muddy, saturated with the rain that has fallen. Temporary pools have formed in low areas. The small streams that run through the forest are swollen, rushing with brown water. The central plaza of the Shabono, which accepted the rain into its open heart, is now a shallow lake of mud and standing water. But the living spaces around the perimeter remain dry, the roof having done its work perfectly. The families emerge from their sections, stepping carefully around the muddy centre, greeting each other after the shared experience of the storm. In the Maloka, the families begin their day within the large communal space. The shared roof that protected them all now shelters their morning activities. The sense of community, strengthened by the night's shared experience, is palpable in the greetings and conversations. As the sun rises higher, though still hidden by the canopy, steam begins to lift from the forest. The heat of the day, which will build as morning progresses, begins to evaporate the water that covers every surface. The steam rises in great white plumes, visible even from the forest floor. The forest is exhaling, releasing the water it captured during the night. The animals, which were silent during the storm, resume their calls. Parrots and toucans announce the morning with sharp cries that cut through the humid air. Howler monkeys begin their territorial calls, the deep resonant sounds carrying for miles through the forest. The insects, which hid from the rain, emerge and begin their constant whirring. The forest returns to life. The storm has passed. It has brought water to the trees, filled the streams, cooled the air, and washed the world clean. The shelters stood. People rested. The knowledge that allowed this peaceful coexistence between humans and storms has been validated once again. Life continues its rhythm, in harmony with the great green world that has once more shown its power and provided its protection. As we reach the end of our journey through the Amazonian storm, we find ourselves with a deeper appreciation for the relationship between people and their environment. The indigenous communities of the Amazon have not conquered their environment or isolated themselves from it. Instead, they have learned to live within it, to understand its patterns, to work with its forces rather than against them. This is not submission to nature's power, but partnership with it. The shelter, built from palm thatch and hardwood poles, is more than a construction. It is knowledge made physical, generations of observation translated into architecture. Every angle of the roof pitch, every layer of thatch, every carefully positioned post represents a lesson learned, a problem solved, a technique refined through countless iterations. The builders did not have textbooks or engineering degrees, but they possessed something equally valuable: direct, continuous observation of how materials behave, how water moves, how structures stand or fall. The hammock suspended above the forest floor is more than a bed. It is a solution to specific challenges, refined over centuries of experience. The elevation, the weaving pattern, the suspension technique. Each element addresses a particular aspect of survival in the rainforest. The hammock represents the accumulation of a knowledge about every creature that moves across the forest floor, about the thermal properties of damp earth, and about the human body's need for rest that is both secure and comfortable. The peaceful sleep achieved during the storm is not luck or accident. It is the result of preparation, understanding, and acceptance. The storm is powerful, but it is also expected. The signs of its approach are read in the air, in the light, in the behaviour of animals. The rain is heavy, but the shelter is designed specifically for this intensity of water. The night is dark, but the fire provides light and warmth, a small sun brought under human control. The forest is alive with potential dangers, but the hammock provides elevation and the smoke provides protection, creating a safe space within the wild landscape. This integration of human life with natural forces offers a perspective often lost in modern existence, where comfort frequently means separation from the environment. In climate-controlled buildings, behind sealed windows, insulated from the weather, modern life often seeks to create an artificial world that excludes nature's variability. But this exclusion comes at a cost, a disconnection from natural rhythms, a loss of understanding about how the world actually works, a dependence on systems that can fail. The Amazonian approach is different. The storm is not something to be feared or avoided, it's something to be understood and accommodated. Its power is acknowledged, its patterns are recognised, and the shelter is designed to work with these forces rather than simply resisting them. The steep roof does not try to stop the rain, but guides it, accepts its presence, and channels it safely away. The shelter does not resist the environment, but works with it, accepting rain into designed channels, allowing smoke to rise through breathable thatch, using the forest's own materials to create protection within the forest. The thatch comes from palms that grow in the same rain it will later shed. The hardwood poles are cut from trees that have themselves withstood countless storms. The vines used for lashing grow strong precisely because they must survive the forest's challenges. This circular relationship, using the forest to create protection from the forest, reflects a profound understanding of ecological integration. The people are not separate from the ecosystem, but part of it. They harvest materials, but they do so in ways that allow regeneration. They modify their environment, but they do so in ways that maintain its fundamental character and productivity. The forest continues to provide because it is not depleted but rather managed with long-term thinking. The sleep achieved in these shelters to the rhythm of rain on thatch, in the company of community, surrounded by the smoke-scented air and cradled in woven cocoons, represents a kind of peace that comes from being in right relationship with the world. Not separate from nature, not dominating it, but living within it with understanding and respect. This peace is not the absence of challenge, but the presence of competence, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that one's preparations are adequate, that one's knowledge is sound, that one's community is reliable. There is a completeness to this way of living that extends beyond mere survival. The shelter, the fire, the hammock, the communal presence, these elements combine to create not just safety but genuine comfort. The storm outside, for all its power, becomes almost a gift. It provides the perfect conditions for rest, the steady sound, the cool air that makes warmth more precious.